All right, so we're back at the Cracks in Postmodernity. Today we have a very special guest, Dr. Melina Abdullah, who is a professor of Pan-African Studies, the founder of Black Lives Matter Grassroots, and is the vice presidential candidate running with Brother Cornel West. Dr. Abdullah, thank you so much for coming on.
Sure. Thank you for having me.
So before we get into the campaign, I want people to know a little bit about your background. Tell us your story and then, how you got into working with Brother West.
Sure. So my day job is I'm a professor of Pan-African Studies at Cal State LA. I organize. I've been an organizer for decades. I organize with Black Lives Matter Grassroots, which is the on-the-ground work that Black Lives Matter does worldwide. We have 39 chapters and 43 formations. And I'm a mama. I have 3 children. And yeah, so that's a little bit about who I am. I first became familiar with Dr. West when I was an undergrad. When I was an undergrad, his book Race Matters came out when I was a student at Howard, and so that was actually my first meeting of him. Was when I was a student at Howard University, an undergraduate student at Howard University. And he's been hugely influential on my career and intellectual work as a scholar. And then I got to know him a little bit when, the attacks on Black people have taken many, many forms, including attacks on Black studies. And so I'm former chair of the Department of Pan-African Studies at Cal State LA. And had Dr. West, was fortunate enough to have Dr. West come in and speak and really kind of double down on our struggle to not only maintain but expand Pan-African studies and ethnic studies. And eventually we won, and I helped to kind of chart that course and winning an ethnic studies requirement in the California State University system, as well as in Los Angeles Unified School District. Dr. West was one of the people who told the university, warned the university if they came after ethnic studies and Pan-African studies in particular, that it would be an issue that would have effects far beyond the confines of the campus. And so got to work with him on that. And then when Black Lives Matter was born, was involved with Dr. West and marched with Dr. West in Ferguson, and was really, really impressed not only by his intellectualism. I think that that's undisputable, right? Everyone will say that Dr. West is one of the geniuses of our time. But I think that what really deepened my respect for him was his willingness to put what he knows as an intellectual into place on the ground. And so marched with him in Ferguson in 2014, and really, again, deepened my respect for him, and have been in and out of spaces with him, over the course of decades now. And when he announced he was running for president of the United States, I was elated. That was summer of 2023. I was elated and overjoyed and really honored to be asked to periodically introduce him at different events, or, have my children. My children are also very active. My children are the co-founders of Black Lives Matter Youth Vanguard. And they were asked to speak alongside him. Both of them have had the opportunity to speak alongside him. And so we were all honored to do that. And I interviewed him for my radio program in, I guess it would have been March of this year, and received a phone call a couple of days later, thinking that it was a follow-up on the interview. Mm-hmm. And I wound up, there was a little pause. It was Dr. West and his wife on the phone, and there was a little pause. And anybody who's ever heard Dr. West speak or been in conversation with him knows that that's a rarity, that Dr. West is never slow or short on words. And, his wife, Anahita, said, just ask her. and he asked me to be his vice presidential running mate. And I was overjoyed and heart soared, and then had to check in with my children and my parents and my organizing community. And that's how I wound up coming on the ticket in April of this year, and am very honored and humbled to do so.
Wow, it's an amazing story. Just to follow the trajectory of, since you read Race Matters all the way up until being asked to run with him for president. I want to ask you, what would you say is the most important part of your platform to you? Like, what do you think is one of the most essential things that you're proposing in this bid for the candidacy?
Well, I think that there is no one thing, but there is an approach that is really grounded in what we say our platform is: truth, justice, and love. Truth, justice, and love. And I know that sounds pie in the sky, but we are living in a world and in a society and in a nation where there's a shortage of truth, justice, and love, right? And we have to have them in that order, that we have to begin with truth, a truth that this country is not only wasting, but misusing our resources and spending 62 cents out of every dollar on war when we could be using that to house our people, right? So we have to confront the truth of that, confront the truth that, when we talk about budgets, they are zero-sum games, and they are statements about our own ethics. They are moral and ethical documents. And so we have to be willing to say that we're going to pull back those resources and ground ourselves in the second principle, which is justice. And justice means that everyone in this country, we have enough for everyone in this country to be housed. We have enough for everyone in this country to be fed clean, healthy food. We have enough for everyone in this country to be educated pre-K through PhD for free. Not just talking about student loan debt forgiveness, but there should be no student loans in the first place, because education should be free. And then when you get to the love, we're not talking about that namby-pamby kind of love, right? We're talking about the kind of love that's a verb, right? The kind of love that demonstrates that we care for one another. And that means being abolitionists in our principles. That means upending systems that demonstrate real disdain for communities, beginning with Black communities. And the other side of abolition means building new systems of public safety, systems of justice that really are nurturing and help communities to develop and thrive. And so when people say put some meat on those bones, we'd say, tangibly what that means is absolutely stopping the genocide in Palestine, stopping the funding to Israel, which has proven itself to be a terrorist state when we look at where we are with what Israel's doing now. It also means making sure that we recognize that although 2020 is past, 2020 was still right when everyone was chanting Black Lives Matter. Black lives still matter. We mean making sure that we advance racial justice and gender justice and healthcare justice, which means more than healthcare for all. It means making sure that we also abolish medical apartheid and deal with injustices within those systems. And it means an economic justice that's really commonsensical, like people should be paid a wage at one job that allows them to live. $27 an hour minimum wage, federal minimum wage is what we're saying needs to happen for starters.
Yeah, so I mean, this is such a comprehensive platform that, as you said, like isn't afraid to look at these hard truths. The amount of money that's being wasted when it could be spent on, helping people live more dignified lives. But also, other than the truth, this focus on justice and love. I think it's interesting how like there are plenty of people who are very committed to the cause of justice, but too often I see it devolving in a type of antagonism that lacks love. And I know, especially for Brother West, when he talks about love, like there's the spiritual, there's a religious dimension behind that. Um, and that's the thing. Like sometimes you see people talking about religious values, especially on the right, but they lose sight of this of the imperative to fight for justice. So you kind of see these extremes, these either or, but what you're saying is you want it all together. I think that's it's such a rarity to hear people talk about this again, like such an all-encompassing kind of vision. Um, and the thing is that like a lot of people will often say, like, okay, that's great that you have these moral ideals, but voting for a third party, don't you run the risk of being overly idealistic? People say, it's gonna split the vote, you're wasting your vote. What do you say to these people who are skeptical about parties who aren't Democrat or Republican? What do you say to people who say, you're wasting your vote if you vote for them?
Well, one, that's nonsense, right? It's nonsense to say that we shouldn't do everything that we can to disrupt the duopoly, right? We know that both the Democrats and the Republicans are under the thumb of predatory capitalist interests, right? We know that they're under the thumb of APAC, right? That they are beholden to interests that are not the people's interests. And we know that the only way to disrupt the duopoly is to provide additional options. So we believe in a third party, fourth party, fifth party, because people should be able to vote their vision, not their fear.
Yeah.
What's being sold to us right now is this idea that Donald Trump is this huge, scary boogeyman. And he is a huge, he's the embodiment of evil. When we talk about white supremacist, patriarchal, heteronormative capitalism, that is Donald Trump, absolutely. And Kamala Harris advances many of those same things, and she just does it with a smile. And, what we know is the Democratic Party, and what Kamala Harris has said is that she will continue to fund the state of Israel. She has said that she doesn't even believe in a $15 an hour minimum wage. She's, promoted the increased spending to police and prisons, even though she says, let's be smart on crime. And the data shows us that more police don't create safer communities. And so we have to have those who some might say are idealistic, but we'll say that no, we're grounded in vision. And without vision, you're tied to what you've always had. And so the policy pillars that we've developed them in concert with some of the most brilliant visionary minds on the planet, right? Folks who are deeply grounded in this work, right? And so, part of our gender justice platform was shaped by these young women who said gender justice isn't just about equal pay for equal work. Gender justice is also about, they're one of the people who's been hugely influential for me is a young woman who's both a beauty queen and a rocket scientist, literally.
Wow.
Her name is Manju, and she's the founder of Operation Period, which, I'm not old, but I'm her mama's generation, right? And I did never think about the fact that we shouldn't. Gender justice is also about putting free period products in restrooms. And she helped to shape that. So these policy pillars are about really engaging. The reason they're so expansive is we've engaged with people who've been on the ground doing the work because we've been on the ground doing the work, and we've asked for their help in developing things out. And that's why they're so expansive and visionary, but also lead us down a road of true justice. And I think that that's what you'll get when you vote for Cornel West and Melina Abdullah. And it sounds weird to talk about myself in third person, but a West-Abdullah ticket is candidates who are unafraid to advance what real justice looks like.
Mm. And as you said at the beginning, that the duopoly is kind of enmeshed in this very corporate capitalist kind of model, whereas your fundraising model is very different. The sources that you're getting money from is yeah. I'll let you speak for yourself, but tell us about how the commitment you have to kind of ethically sourcing funds from like ethical sources, pretty much. How is this different from what we see in the mainstream parties?
Sure. So we've been criticized for being broke, and our campaign does not have a lot of money. We are a people powered
Mhm.
campaign. And, you know, when they were criticizing us, our the first principle on our platform is truth. The truth is, and Dr. West says it this way, we are broke as the Ten Commandments. We we don't have lots of money, right? Every penny that we get comes in from regular folks. My Baba, he's a retired school teacher, Vietnam vet, and we are the first political donation he's made and the largest political donation that he's made. Um, and where our dollars come from that. My own child, who's 20 years old, donated $200. She's a 20-year-old college student, but had a summer job, donated $200 to our campaign, right? This is where we're receiving our funds. When we do fundraisers, they're not at a country club, or we don't serve chicken and caviar. I don't know if those two things go together. I don't know. But we're having our fundraisers. We have what we call grassroots fundraisers at barbershops, right? My cousin Dave hosted us in his barbershop, Levels Barbershop in West Oakland, right? And that's where we're having our fundraisers, and in people's homes. And people are donating $20 when they can. And we don't have a big old campaign staff that's paid. Our staff is engaged because they believe in this vision, right? And so that's what it is. And I think that that's what allows us to run a righteous campaign. I've had a show on public radio for decades now. I guess the first show I ever had on KPFK was 21 years ago.
Wow.
And one of the things that I loved about being on Pacifica, and I would teach this in my classes when I would tell people, listen to Pacifica Radio, right? Is that when you're funded this way, you know, we want you to donate your $20. But when you donate your $20, you don't own us. We're not owned by anybody, because if you take away your $20, we still have other people's $20 or $5, right?
Yeah.
And so we want everybody to contribute what they can, but we want them to contribute because they believe in what we're doing, not because they're seeking to own us. And that's what the Democrats and the Republicans do, that they allow themselves to be bought through both big campaign donations, but also through independent expenditures. We can think about the role of police associations in advancing their interests through not only campaign contributions, but also independent expenditures, and the ways in which that allows corporations and special interests and the interests that counter the people's interests to run those two parties.
Mm. Yeah, no, it's interesting you're saying the freedom that comes from taking that risk, because yes, I mean it's more work. There's less luxuries, less comfort, but you're saying that you can kind of rest in knowing that you're standing for what you know is true, that you're carrying this campaign in a dignified way. And that, also interesting how you're putting this emphasis on the people. Like it's the people who are funding it, it's the people who are planning, helping to plan these rallies, these events. So I want to wrap up by asking you, as you've been on the campaign trail, as you've been going to these various events, meeting people, tell us something that's that struck you that amongst the everyday people that you've met? What's something that stood out to you from the encounters that you've had with people?
That people see themselves in this campaign, that people really understand what it is that we're doing, that people understand we're not running because we have political ambitions. I always said I would never, ever, ever, ever run for office,
Mm.
right? Never, right? And they understand that the reasons that we're running are reasons that resonate with them, that we're running so that everybody can be housed. I'm actually sitting across the table from one of my brothers and comrades, Brother Billion, who was doing work and is doing work to help get off the vote here in California. And when we were trying to qualify for the California ballot, and we needed 73,000 people to re-register under the Justice for All party in order to make the ballot. And Billion said, well, you know what? In Los Angeles, we have 70,000 unhoused people.
Mm.
And so they set up tables outside of homeless shelters, and a lot of unhoused folks registered to vote for the first time. And, you know, that's an insurmountable number. We couldn't register 73,000 people. So we're writing candidates in California. But we've started the ball rolling. We've gotten the ball rolling on moving this new party into existence. And for me, that's what's resonated, is that if unhoused folks, if marginalized folks, if Black folks who say, you know, we need reparations, right? If Palestinian folks, one of our greatest supporters is this young sister who I love dearly, Maya, who is one of the Students for Justice in Palestine organizers. She was here first in Orange County, but now started her first semester at UC Berkeley. You know, if she voting for the first time can be all in, 10 toes down for this campaign, then it's worth the investment. It's worth, you know, what I didn't say is, so how do we get on the campaign trail? We use our rapid rewards points on Southwest, right? That's what we do. We stay in people's houses. I sleep on my brother's couch, and we'll be sleeping on my cousin's couch as we go from place to place because we don't have money, right? But what a blessing to be able to do that. What a blessing. And the final thing I'll mention is I'm the first Muslim to be on a presidential ticket. And I didn't realize it when I was asked. I didn't realize it. But the first campaign stop I ever made, there was and I don't know how familiar you are with what happens and what has happened in Muslim community, but Black Muslims are the plurality of Muslims in this country. But there's been a need for Black Muslims and Arab Muslims to be in greater solidarity. And the first group to ever host me for a campaign event was an Arab Muslim group.
Wow.
And we walked into a room, my brother and I walked into a room of more than 300 people. It was standing room only up in Fremont, California. And it was all Arab Muslims. We were the only two Black people in that room. And mostly sisters came up to me and hugged me and had tears in their eyes and gained such hope from what this campaign means for Muslims and for Muslim women, especially. And so I don't know, we have 47 days left on this campaign trail. And Dr. West will say anything can happen. Anything can happen. But in the words of Charlotta Bass, who's the first Black woman to ever run for vice president of the United States, win or lose, we win by raising the issues. And the issues that we've raised and the way in which we've engaged with community has been absolutely life-changing for me. It's grounded me more deeply in the community work that will continue regardless of the outcome of the election. And I just feel so grateful and humbled and honored to be able to do this. And I'm constantly in prayer that that I that I do this in a way that honors all of my people as well as my foremothers and community.
Mm. Yeah, and I appreciate you saying how, this is something you also pray about because it's clear that for you that this is more than just like you said, this isn't a kind of careerist move. Like this seems like a calling. Like this seems like something is given to you by by something greater than yourself. And you can tell by the way that you speak with such passion, with such conviction. And I think people can say what they want about voting for third parties, not voting within the duopoly. But again, you can't deny that there's something very compelling about seeing someone who really practices what they preach, who really believes in anything at all. So it's again, I appreciate you taking the time to share your story with us and to share your passion. I hope it kind of inspires people to really see that, in the midst of a kind of crazy political situation we have, like there are sources of light, there's a lot of hope. So thank you so much, Dr. Abdullah, for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.